Welcome to 10 a.m. to the point editorial discussion. In this video, we'll have a comprehensive and precise look at the editorial page of the Hindu. Have a look at the editorial page of the Hindu for today. We have two articles for detailed discussion. One is on the latest World Gender Gap Index by World Economic Forum, and second is on a recent court verdict by the Madhya Pradesh High Court on the Special Marriage Act. We'll discuss these two articles in the context of the exam. The other articles will have a quick overview. We have takeaways from that, but they don't deserve a detailed discussion because we don't have that specific takeaways from that. We'll look at them one by one. We'll have a quick overview, then we'll move on to the detailed discussion. First, let's look at the article, the first editorial of the Hindu. It is on the recent decision by the central government to prosecute Arundhati Roy and Sheikh Shaukat Hussain, who is an academic of the Kashmir University. Arundhati Roy, is a Booker Prize winner and a public intellectual and activist. So there was a case pending against them in 2010. So the case was charged under a magistrate court under UAPA. So in 2010, when they made a speech on the Kashmir issue, the case was filed in the magistrate court, but the police didn't find the case seditious to be filed under UAPA. But the court demanded an FIR and the FIR was filed and the case was pending for a long time, for almost 14 years. Now the Lieutenant Governor has given the permission to execute. So that means the case is considered after a long gap of 14 years. The question is, this is a case in which the police didn't find merit to be prosecuted or to be filed a charge sheet under the UAPA in 2010. So what is the logic behind revoking this case in 2024? And that too at a time in which the nature of Kashmir's polity has changed. We know that Article 370 has been abolished and Kashmir is no more a state. So there has been a new solution to this issue. So what is the point behind revoking this case? That is what the article discusses here. The article says that the speech made by these intellectuals, even though they discuss the status of Kashmir, they don't necessarily call or incite violence per se, which means under the Kedarnath judgment, they don't qualify to an unlawful act under the UAPA. So if that is the case, if there is no direct inciting of violence in that case, then what is the point of that execution after 14 years? So this editorial can be seen as a piece of criticism from the newspaper against this government move. That's the article. Moving to the second article, it's an article written by M.K. Narayan. He talks about, so this is his analysis of the 2024 general election. The conclusion or the crux of the article is, he says that the mandate given in 2024 is a mandate against authoritarianism. But despite the people pitching in for against authoritarianism, the opposition failed to seize that opportunity to form a government. If the opposition was successful enough to forge a stable pre-poll alliance in the forms of getting parties like JDU or the United Shiv Sena into their fold, they could have formed the government now. That is what the author thinks. The author also says that a hurt but not wounded Modi will be a bigger threat for democracy and democratic traditions. So Modi is more dangerous than he was before the general elections, says the author, because now he may intensify his divisive politics, says the author. So that's the takeaway, or that's the analysis of this particular article. Moving to the third article, this article is discussed in the context of the recent fires in Kuwait. So you know that 49 migrant laborers were killed in a fire in Kuwait. The fire took place in the Mangaf area of Al Hamadi municipality in Kuwait. You can have a quick look at the map for the prelims. So 49 people were killed. They all were migrant laborers and majority of them were Indians. The article or the author attributes this disaster to the notorious KAFALA system that is prevalent in GCC countries. So to know what KAFALA system is, it is a complex set of laws and practices that ensures the state and citizens hold all the power while the individual migrants are treated as temporary. That means it is a set of laws that gives the control in the hand of citizens over the migrants. And if you take the country of Kuwait, it has 70% of its population as migrants. So there is a threat to the indigenous or the citizens from the migrants in terms of various things: regionalistic spirit, sense of citizenship, all these things. In that regard, they have a robust kafala system to protect the interest of the citizens against the migrants. But this often acts out against the migrants. So almost all the GCC countries follow this kafala system in varying degrees, and everywhere you can see a systematic exploitation of migrant laborers. If you take the number of migrant laborers in these countries, it accounts for 35 million, which is 10% of the overall international migration in the world. And these migrants are accommodated in crowded, unsafe, and unhygienic accommodative systems. So you know that when the COVID pandemic erupted, GCC countries was the first areas to be affected with the severe effects of COVID. And people from GCC countries, these migrants, they were migrating back to their home countries, especially to states like Kerala, because the accommodations there were very unhygienic, crowded, and unsafe. So it was fast spread of COVID, and likewise it traveled to all countries in the world. And this accommodation facility can be attributed to the kafala system, because the migrant laborers cannot collectively bargain for their rights. Their wages are kept low enough that the workers are in a constant state of financial insecurity. Because of this financial insecurity, they cannot raise their voice. At the moment they raise their voice, they are deported. And these things, these low wages, the immediate deportation, and the absolute control of their employer is guaranteed by the kafala system. So this particular fire can be attributed to the system rather than terming it as a one-off incident. That's an interesting perspective of the issue. That's the takeaway for us from this editorial article. Now let's move on to the next article. It is an analysis of the state of Maharashtra. So every day there will be an analysis of one or the other state in the Hindu. And in this week they have discussed, in this day they have discussed Maharashtra. Maharashtra's politics, to be specific, especially the factionalism between the Shiv Sena parties. You know that there was a shift, there was a split in the Shiv Sena party. The faction led by Eknath Shinde formed the government by splitting the Shiv Sena party. So right now, in the recently concluded general elections, both the parties went to elections. They contested to each other in 13 of the constituencies, and in 7 the Shinde faction came victorious, and in 6 the Thackeray faction came victorious. The article traces their core vote bank. It says that the Shinde faction has its core vote bank as the core Hindutva votes, which aligns with the interest of the BJP or the BJP vote bank. Whereas when it comes to the Thackeray faction, what they bang on is the votes of people who rely on Maratha pride, secularism, and federalism. This aligns with the Congress vote bank. So the Shiva Sena's either merging or going into other factions is a distant possibility now, because their vote banks have been shifted along ideological lines right now. And one advantage that the Thackeray faction has right now is the revival of Congress in Maharashtra. Because of that, there's an increased spirit of this vote bank in the elections, which may play out in the upcoming assembly elections. So that's the perspective this article discusses. Now, final quick overview article is the data point by the Hindu. It traces the data of women in corporate fields. In a general view, it says that the number of women who are entering into corporate field has increased, but the number of women who leaves the corporate field is also very high. It's just like the case of women in all the institutions. If you take the general enrollment ratio, the number of girls who gets enrolled in our educational institutions are getting high, but the number of people who drop out after a particular age is also high when it comes to women. So this is a general trend, and it is very visible in the corporate sector, and one of the reasons is the rising number of POSH cases, or the sexual harassment cases in the workplace. So the article says that there is an increased number of registrations when it comes to POSH cases, but this registration can be attributed to the rising awareness or the rising trend of registering cases, because the social taboo against registration is getting diluted. It is not because the number of cases are rising, it is because there is an increased case of reporting. Just because this taboo still exists, this very well can be a tip of the iceberg. So the real issues remains there as it is for a long time. The women who are exiting from the corporate sector are due to various reasons like marriage, pregnancy, family responsibilities, social reasons, etc. POSH cases forms one among them, and in recent times you can see a rising number of POSH cases, but this is attributed to the rising number of registrations rather than the rising cases, and this is very well a case of under-reporting because the social taboo still exists. You can refer to the data, but this is more like a case study. They have taken case studies for this, and you can refer to this data of various companies. You can use it for a question if you want, but since it's a very specific case study, I didn't quote the data here, but the overall idea of the article is this. Now let's move to the detailed discussion. The first editorial for the detailed discussion is on the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index. It's a very famous and very reliable index, which is a hot topic for the UPSC prelims as well. It becomes important for us under the society part in GS paper 1 because there woman is an important topic. Then it becomes important for the prelims aspect as well. Now if you look at the latest data, global gender gap stands at 68.5% in 2024. So gender gap means the way this index is being calculated, how they calculate is like the percentage is the percentage at which the gender gap is being closed. Suppose there is complete gender gap in a society, that means the percentage of gender gap that is closed is 0. So 68.5% means 68.5% gender gap is closed right now. In 2023 it was 68.4%. So if you look at the improvement in 1 year, it was just 0.1%. You can term it like a glacial increase. Just like the movement of a glacier, it's a very minute increase. And WEF says that it will take 5 generations after the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals to fill this gap. To fill the gender gap by 100%, it will take 5 generations after 2030. Right now, Iceland is the only country that has a gender gap index of more than 90%. It stands at 93.5%. So Iceland is the only country to have it more than 90%, and that they are placed first among the list. When we take the case of India, it is placed at 129 out of 146 countries. So we have closed the gender gap to 64.1%, just below the overall average. We are placed at 64.1% gender gap in 2024, and our rank is 129 out of 146. We have slipped 2 points from 127 in 2023, and this slip is attributed to a dip in education and the political empowerment sector. So political empowerment can be directly seen in the recent Lok Sabha elections, because in the previous Lok Sabha our tally was around 14%. Women representation in the Lok Sabha was around 14%. There is a decrease of 4% in the current Lok Sabha. It stands at 13.6% in the present Lok Sabha. So it is a very clear and direct example of the dip in political empowerment. In education also we have setbacks, a minute setback to be precise. From 127 we have slipped to 129. But when we take into account a country of 140 crore population, this minute dip can make a huge impact. So what are the measures we can take on this? The first and foremost thing, or the general outset, is to increase the number of women in a general labor force. For that, we have to prevent dropouts in the higher education sector. We have to provide more job skills that are relevant for employability. We have to ensure that there is safety at the workplace, something related to what we discussed in the previous article. And finally, on the social front, there should be a tendency to help women to keep their jobs after marriage. For that, there should be shared responsibility within the family. If there is no shared responsibility, women will face the double burden of running their families and having their job. Ultimately, they'll end up quitting their job. If that has to be prevented, there should be a shared responsibility. So that's the takeaway from it. You'll get a clear idea about the recent index, the statistics that can be used for an answer, the measures that can be taken, and the perspective of India and this global index. That's the takeaway from it. Let's move to the final article. It deals with the Special Marriage Act. It again is an important part in the GS1 paper. Under the woman or the marriage part, there has been a question in 2023 directly on marriages. Then it deals with the Special Marriage Act, so it becomes important for the GS2 part of the polity as well. Now, what is the case here? The case is, in Madhya Pradesh High Court, an unmarried interfaith couple sought police protection for their marriage. But the court ruled that instead of granting police protection to them, the court went on to check the validity of the marriage. So the court said that this marriage cannot be valid. In that case, the protection is not needed. So this is a major issue if left unchecked, says the authors, because all the court judgments in India have precedential value. So this can be used as a reference, or this can act as a slippery slope. The court in this particular case considered Section 4 of the Special Marriage Act, which excludes marriages between persons with prohibited degree of relationship. So this particular marriage of the unmarried interfaith couple was brought under the ambit of Section 4 of the Special Marriage Act, which deals with prohibited degrees of relationship. But it is very problematic. We'll see that in the issues part. Now, what is Section 4 of the Special Marriage Act? Section 4 of the Special Marriage Act deals with related couples. So, related couples, when they get married, there will be biological problems. And that is the context in which Section 4 of the Special Marriage is discussed. And it is not related to interfaith couples. But the court used this section in the context of interfaith couples. That is the first problem. Second, when protection is being sought by individuals, the case is considered as a matter of fundamental right of choice. So it is considered under Article 21, which is right to life. Here the court didn't consider the particular case under Article 21. Instead, the court went into checking the legality of the marriage instead of protecting the life of these two citizens. So irrespective of their faith or religion, their life and property should be protected by the state, which was overlooked here. Third, right to choice of partner was also overlooked. Any individual in India has the right to choose their partner. And the limitation is very, very minute and specific with respect to Section 4, which is biological relation. Other than that, marriage between interfaith couple or intercaste couple shouldn't be a hindrance, because that is a violation of the right to choice. Here that was also diluted by the court. The next is the very basis of the Special Marriage Act was questioned here, because Special Marriage Act was provided as the safe space for interfaith couples or people who don't want personal laws to be imposed on them. We have the personal laws like the Hindu marriage bill or the Christian or the Muslim personal laws under which people get married. But for people who don't want to follow this personal codes, they can use the Special Marriage Act. But by checking into the sanctity of interfaith marriages, the court questioned the very basis of the Special Marriage Act. This is also in violation of the previous precedents, because the Madras High Court have granted protection even to same-sex couples under the ambit of right to life when they sought protection in the court. Because checking the sanctity of marriage is a different thing. Here the question is about giving them the protection, protecting their right to choice, which was diluted by the Madhya Pradesh High Court verdict. So if this verdict is kept unchecked, it can have a precedential values and it can act as a slippery slope, violating the very basic tenets under which Special Marriage Act is placed. As a conclusion, we can use the Supreme Court judgment in Shah Jahan versus Ashokan KM case of 2018, in which the court held that intimacies of marriage lie within a core zone of privacy which is inviolable. So marriage of persons, individuals, should be seen as a matter of privacy and which is inviolable. So that concept is being diluted in this court verdict. It can be used as a case study, or it can be used as a value addition for any answer on the mains, because it deals with the issues related to marriages here. Special Marriage Act is also discussed in detail in this article. That's the takeaway for you. Thank you for listening.